Hey y'all, today we are going to talk about classical civilization, specifically the Mediterranean region. Now the Mediterranean region is here in red, the Mediterranean Sea, and around that. When the last unit we had talked about Greece, or Hellenic civilization, that was conquered by Alexander the Great and the Macedonians, and then later conquered by Rome. So we're going to get into all that today. It started out after Greece with Hellenistic civilization, named because they were like Hellenic civilization. So this started all with the Peloponnesian Wars, where Greece was fighting with each other. Sparta and Athens had pulled all the city-states together. They were fighting against each other. And this weakened them so much that the Macedonians were able to come in and invade and take them over in 359 BCE. King Philip was the Macedonian ruler who led them in the campaign against the Greeks to take them over. But when he got there, he liked Greek culture so much that he adopted it as the standard, which making this Macedonian civilization Hellenistic. They really liked Greek philosophy, art, architecture, hierarchy, and government. And he liked it so much that he had his own son, Alexander, taught by Aristotle, who was a Greek philosopher. Now his son, Alexander, grew up to become Alexander the Great. He continued to conquer and took more and more territory, even past Greece. So he spread past Greece into the Fertile Crescent, down to Egypt, and then he spread all the way over to the Indus River Valley, taking over what was left of Persia at the time. And as he did this, he spread Greek culture as he conquered, but he also increased trade. There wasn't too much trade going on between the Indus and Mesopotamia, a little bit, but not much. But as he started to spread his empire, they started trading in between the civilizations as well. Now, Alexander, once he conquered such a large empire, he continued to conquer further and further west. And he split his empire up into 3 districts. Each one was ruled by a different military general. And as he conquered further and further east, further and further west, he was in the west with his army, which left the eastern portion of his empire vulnerable. And eventually the Romans are going to come in and take over his empire. Now, the Romans start out as a small city-state on the Italian peninsula. And they speak Latin, which will eventually turn into all the different Romance languages like German, Spanish, English, Italian, all these different languages. And so that's going to kind of be a influence that they have. But in Rome, they had a hierarchy. Now, their richest class was the patricians. The poor people and the small middle class they had were known as plebeians. And then finally, they had slaves. Now, Rome had a representative democracy as well, which is when the people vote on government officials, which will make decisions for them. And they had 2 branches of government. The first one was the Senate, which represents the patricians, the rich people. The second one was the Assembly, which represents the plebeians, or the poor people. The slaves, of course, don't have a branch of the government. Now, each branch had a consul, which was the leader of that branch of government. And the Senate and the Assembly voted on laws, which were known as the 12 tables. These were what the representatives voted on. Now, the Romans also believed in a religion called paganism. Now, this was a polytheistic religion, and it did not have a central codified set of laws. Rather, it was sort of a collection of beliefs that they sort of started believing in over time, from a bunch of different sources, including Greek mythology. Now, the myths explain natural events, such as why the sun goes across the sky, why you have seasons, things like that. But they believed in a contractual existence with God, where if you did what God wanted, they would take care of you. And this was a state religion, so the state controlled this religion. The Roman government controlled this, and so the religion itself affected many political events. The citizens were required to make sacrifices to the gods, but eventually, like Greek mythology, paganism lost its popularity to this idea of using reason and to other Eastern religions. Now, Rome started out as a small city-state, but they started expanding rapidly to become an empire. By 264 BCE, they had conquered the entire Italian peninsula, right here. By around 200 BCE, they had defeated Carthage. Carthage was a Phoenician colony. The Phoenicians had come across the Mediterranean Sea and created a little civilization over here. They defeated them, and that was really their last big challenge within the Mediterranean region. So by 146 CE, Rome had conquered Alexander's empire and the entire Mediterranean region, and then they started pushing into Europe. Now, the Romans allowed people to keep their local customs if they didn't fight back. They also allowed their rulers to stay in power as long as they paid tribute to the Roman government. Now, if they fought, though, the Romans would enslave or kill anybody who fought them. Now, eventually, the Roman Empire started to have some trouble. The number of slaves increased as they conquered more and more people, more and more territory. And having slaves, that means they're going to be put to work. So the farmers and a lot of other workers were unemployed. And this led to an increase in poverty. Also, inflation occurs, which is where money loses its value, increasing poverty again. And then finally, officials in the Senate and the Assembly start to fight and plot against each other. A lot of times they even try to murder each other so they can get somebody else in the Senate or Assembly in their position. Now, the Senate and the Assembly tried to solve this problem by electing a triumvirate, which is a three-person government. But eventually that triumvirate boiled down to just one person. Julius Caesar rises to power and he declares himself emperor. But the Senate doesn't like this, so they assassinate him, they kill him. So the Senate, after that, they try to do the same thing. They elect another triumvirate, and again, another person rises to power. Augustus Caesar is going to rise to power as the emperor. But this time, the Senate goes along with it, and Rome becomes a monarchy. They're going to accept one ruler called a Caesar. That's the Roman emperor. Now, the Senate and the Assembly still exist, but they act more as advisors to the emperor rather than the actual lawmakers. Now, Augustus Caesar was the first emperor crowned for life, and he started a civil service branch of the government. And this branch of the government is basically the people who make the government function correctly. They spread out throughout the empire and start to get the people following the laws. And make sure everything's functioning efficiently as well. Now, after Augustus Caesar, they started a time period of peace and prosperity known as a golden age. But in Rome, they called it Pax Romana, which meant Roman peace. And there were several reasons to this. One, they had a large empire with a strong military. They had the rule of law. They had great sailors on the Mediterranean Sea, which helped them trade. They had a common coinage, which again helped them trade. And they had an extensive infrastructure. They had a large network of roads. If you ever heard the term, all roads lead to Rome, that's where it comes from. Because everybody could get to Rome on one of their roads. They also had aqueducts, which were large tunnels that were built up that would carry water into the city. They also had sewage. They invented cement. They created the first large dams and arches as a form of architecture as well. Now, eventually there were some uprisings, especially religious uprisings in the Roman Empire. The Zealots were a group of Jewish fanatics who did not want to be ruled by Romans. They're carrying on the tradition after the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians had ruled them. And they were looking for a Messiah, this person to come and set them free from Roman rule. Now, the group that actually rebelled was called the Maccabees. The Maccabees they were successful in taking back Jewish territory from Rome. But Rome got together its army, came back, and took that territory back from them. And when they did that, the Romans, so that the Jewish people couldn't get together and rebel anymore, they decided to send them out of their homeland, away from their home, and divide them up kind of throughout the Roman territory so they couldn't get together and rebel. Also, another religious uprising was Christianity. Christianity was becoming very popular and spreading throughout the empire. Now, at first, emperors like Nero persecuted them because they thought it was a threat to Roman rule. But eventually, a guy named Constantine came along, and he stopped the persecution of Christians. He had a vision at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, where God sort of delivered his troops, and he saw them fighting with the cross. And so he stopped the persecution, and later on, Emperor Herodotus is going to make Christianity the official Roman religion, and started persecuting other religions. Now, eventually Rome is going to decline. They started to have a lot of tyranny in the emperors. And that's basically where emperors are trying to increase their own wealth and power at the expense of the empire. And to cover this up, they didn't really want people to know that they weren't good rulers. So they used something called bread and circus, which is basically cheap entertainment and charity. And this distracted the people of Rome away from all the bad things that were happening. This is why the Colosseum was built. They had gladiator games where people would fight each other. They'd go throw bread to the poor people to make it seem like they were a good ruler. But that didn't exactly fix any of the problems. And there was a huge problem with assassinations. 25 emperors were killed in a matter of 26 years. Another problem was that Emperor Diocletian, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, splits the empire into two districts, okay? The western portion and the eastern portion. And with two different capitals. He moved the capital to Constantinople, which was named after Constantine, which weakens the empire. Now, other reasons for the decline was that the large empire was costly to rule. It was expensive to pay troops to go and protect everything. It was also, they had an epidemic disease that spread and killed a lot of people, which makes people unhappy. And then the army was using mercenaries, which are paid soldiers. These mercenaries were not loyal to Rome anymore. They were loyal to whoever could pay them the highest. So they weren't the best soldiers that like the Romans used to have when they were expanding. And then the final blow was invasions. Okay, Attila led the Huns to attack eastern Rome. Okay, but Attila wasn't actually, and the Huns weren't the ones that made it fall. It was actually the Germanic people, and the Germanic people are trying to get away from the Huns, and they go into Western Europe. And the Huns actually leave, and Western Europe falls to these Germanic people. The eastern portion of Rome is going to continue as the Byzantine Empire. Okay? So here again we have the aftermath of Rome. Western Rome falls, the Germanic people, they start several different kingdoms. And then you have Eastern Rome becoming the Byzantine Empire, which we will cover in Unit 3.